How hard will it be for Boogie to fit in on this Warriors team if he isn't ready until the end of the season?
Well, I believe the general manager is doing the right thing because they've taken the window and they've extended it. Most people that talk about Boogie said he should be ready to play or definitely do on-court stuff in December, January. Then people talk about the All-Star break, that being February. So if you as the general manager are sending the message to not only throughout the organization but to your fans, man, we're not expecting him to. When do the playoffs start, Nick?
Right, April?
April. I mean, you've extended that window so in case you have a setback. Because we know the Warriors, the pressure is not on the regular season. It's about the postseason. And if you can think about how they've dominated the postseason the last 2 years, and that's the only thing he's got to get ready. To me, that alleviates a lot of pressure compared to people would say, well, on the other side, if he doesn't play during the regular season, it's a bunch of pressure. Well, in the playoffs, I mean, how contested will they be in the first round? Now, I do believe that the regular season is important because how the seeding might go in the West. You don't want to be the 3rd seed. You don't want to be the 4th seed. You want to be in the 1 or 2 slot, which they have been in this run that they're on.
Like, they would be the heavy favorites to be the 1 seed, even though they weren't last year, had they not gotten Boogie. There's no situation that can arise, I would imagine, this season where they're not the 1 or the 2 seed because there's not a team that I'm like, oh, they were really close and they got much better, and
right.
The Warriors didn't get worse. To me, this is a bit of mental games, and I don't say that with a negative connotation. It's just they are setting the table in my eyes for when Boogie does come back, which will be during the regular season, he isn't immediately getting the minutes that he thought he would, the touches that he thought he would. They can say, hey, man, it's always been part of the plan. It's always been for you to be full go come the playoffs. Don't worry about it right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then also I think a guy that might be a little disgruntled about his lack of playing time in a regular season game in February, harder to be that type of distraction for your team in your first ever playoff appearance, where all of a sudden you're playing with a bunch of champions, the 2-time defending champions, and if no, wait till the playoffs. And if that carrot they've been extending, you never actually get to grab, it's hard to raise too much of a ruckus because now you're in your first playoffs. I do want to say this, though. If Bob Myers is correct, like if this were to be the actual case, that Boogie is not ready for full go until the playoffs, then this will have been just a useless experiment. Because what they will not do, I can say this with almost full certainty, unless they suffer some significant injury, is have one lineup and rotation throughout the regular season and then come the playoffs, drastically remake it to fit Boogie in. Boogie is going to have to start fitting in before the playoffs for him to be useful in the playoffs.
There's a very big difference, though, between what Boogie seems to think and what Myers seems to be saying. Boogie's like, I'll be ready by training camp, and it is an 8 to 10 month rehab period with the Achilles. That is much more than an 8 to 10 month rehab. I think what Bob Myers is doing, which is obvious, is he's tempering expectations so that someone like Boogie Cousins, who tends to maybe have a bit of maybe an irrational approach to where he should be and how he fits in, doesn't start pounding his fist. But my question to you would be, wouldn't this be a conversation that his people would have had with the Warriors before signing on? Like, look, hey, this is where we need you. I mean, maybe the Warriors themselves are thinking, hey, you know where we could use him? In the postseason, where the Rockets got close. But let's maybe have this conversation with him so he knows.
I don't think there were extended conversations. I think the conversations were what Steve Kerr said they were. Listen, there's going to be 4, 5, 6 possessions. You don't touch the basketball. You good with that? Yep. We're going to be very cautious with your rehab approach. You good with that? Absolutely. Now, again, like I don't think Bob Myers is coming out there saying he won't play until the playoffs. He's just he is setting the goalpost so far down the field that whenever Boogie comes back, the Warriors can say ahead of schedule and start building that narrative for him, which is the best thing the Warriors can do for DeMarcus Cousins this season, is help him repair his image. Part of that also, by the way, is help the rest of the league think he's healthy, rehab went well, he's ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and we also can't forget how they acquired DeMarcus Cousins. He called them. They didn't call him. So he called them. In their response, they didn't even believe the first initial contact. So in having several conversations, they say it took 3 conversations for the general manager and them to be kind of believe that, yeah, this might happen. I'm sure they got the injury report and they've got the doctor's information. They couldn't have signed him without trying to look into that. And like you talked about, the conversation with Steve Kerr, Steve let him know as far as what some of the things that we're thinking. When you have an injured player like DeMarcus, who has been an all-star, you want to try to remove the expectations or kind of maybe downplay with your expectations early to give him a chance. Also, this is a strange injury. It's not an ACL. It's not something that we deal with all the time. We're talking about an Achilles. We haven't seen the elite players or NBA players come back and do as well as they have done, except in 30 years, we've seen Dominique Wilkins do that. We haven't seen Kobe and a bunch of other players.
Elton Brand, who's stylistically similar. He has 2 careers, pre-Achilles, post-Achilles.
You know, so I believe that they're going about it the right way. They have won 2 out of the last 3 championships. There is no pressure during the regular season, so why put that pressure on their newly acquired player in DeMarcus Cousins?
All right, there's one guy whose name we haven't mentioned much when it comes to the Warriors and DeMarcus Cousins, but I think he is the player that could be the key to how this thing works and how much DeMarcus can handle what will be a much lesser role than he's had anywhere else, and that's Andre Iguodala. Because Andre Iguodala walked into a situation very different than Boogie. He was traded for having started every single game of his career. Every game Iggy had been healthy from his rookie season to the moment he got traded to the Warriors, he was a starter for. He's traded there thinking, I'm going to be a starter. Steve Kerr then makes some changes. Draymond becomes a starter. A lot of things happen. And he has to go to Andre Iguodala and say, you're not a starter, and you're never going to be a starter. His first 3 years there, he started 1 game. Last year, he started 7 due to injury. And Iggy, it was hard for him early on, but he eventually realized how he could be used and why it was good for the team as a whole. He didn't sign up for that. He was thrown into that. Andre Iguodala is a respected veteran in this league and is a guy who had no winning experience prior to coming to Golden State. All he got in Golden State, he got no all-star appearances, he got none of that stuff. All he got was the championship pedigree, capped off by the Finals MVP. Andre Iguodala talking to DeMarcus Cousins about how to go through this part of a career, I think is incredibly valuable because Steph and Katie and Clay don't have that experience. They don't have I went from the star guy to a lesser guy. He's the one guy who can talk DeMarcus through this.
That is a good point. All right.